and I'll probably die with a bullet in me, or in jail. I'm sorry, but that don't help. I'd give my life to be able to tell you what's in my heart, but I can't. It wouldn't be square." He wondered why no change came into the steady blue of her eyes as he went on with the truth. The pallor was gone from her cheeks. Her lips seemed redder, and what he was saying did not seem to startle her or frighten her. "Don't you understand, Nada?" he cried. "I'm bad. The police want me. I'm a fugitive, always running away, always hiding. An outlaw." She nodded. "I know it, Mister Roger," she said quietly. "I heard you tell Peter that a long time ago. And Mr. Cassidy was at our place the day after you and Peter ran away from Indian Tom's cabin, and I showed him the way to Father John's, and he told me a lot about you, and he told Father John a lot more, and it made me awful proud of you, Mister Roger, and I want to go with you and Peter." "Proud?" gasped Jolly Roger. "Proud? Of me?" She nodded again. "Mr. Cassidy, the policeman, he used just the word you used a minute ago. He said you was square, even when you robbed other people. He said he had to get you in jail if he could, but he hoped he never would. He said he'd like to have a man like you for a brother. And Peter loves you. And I—" The color came into her white face. "I'm going with you and Peter," she finished. Something came to relieve the tenseness of the moment for Jolly Roger. Peter, nosing in a thick patch of bunch grass, put out a huge snowshoe rabbit, and the two crashed in a startling avalanche through the young jackpines, Peter's still puppyish voice yelling in a high staccato as he pursued. Jolly Roger turned from Nada and stared where they had gone. But he was seeing nothing. He knew the hour of his mightiest fight had come. In the reckless years of his adventuring he had more than once faced death. He had starved. He had frozen. He had run the deadliest gauntlets of the elements, of beast, and of man. Yet was the strife in him now the greatest of all his life. His heart thumped. His brain was swirling in a vague and chaotic struggle for the mastery of things, and as he fought with himself, his unseeing eyes fixed on the spot where Peter and the snowshoe rabbit had disappeared, he heard Nada's voice behind him, saying again that she was going with him and Peter. In those seconds he felt himself giving way, and the determined action he had built up for himself began to crumble like sand. He had made his confession, and in spite of it, this young girl he worshipped, sweeter and purer than the flowers of the forest, was urging herself upon him. And his soul cried out for him to turn about, and open his arms to her, and gather her into them for as long as God saw fit to give him freedom and life. But still he fought against that mighty urge, dragging reason and right back fragment by fragment, while Nada stood behind him, her wide-open, childishly beautiful eyes beginning to comprehend the struggle that was disrupting the heart of this man who was an outlaw and her god among men. And when Jolly Roger turned, his face had aged to the grayness of stone, and his eyes were dull, and there was a terribly dead note in his voice. "You can't go with us," he said. "You can't. It's wrong, all wrong. I couldn't take care of you in jail, and some day that's where I'll be." More than once when she had spoken of Jed Hawkins, he had seen the swift flash of lightning come into the violet of her eyes. And it came now, and her little hands grew tight at her sides, and bright spots burned in her cheeks. "You won't!" she cried. "I won't let you go to jail. I'll fight for you, if you'll let me go with you and Peter." She came a step nearer. "And if I stay here, Jed Hawkins is going to sell me to a tie cutter over on the railroad. That's what it is, sellin' me. I ain't I mean, I haven't told you before because I was afraid of what you'd do. But it's going to happen unless you let me go with you and Peter. Oh, Mister Roger, Mister Jolly Roger!" Her fingers crept up his arms. They reached his shoulders, and her blue eyes, and her red lips, and the woman's soul in her girl body were so close to him he could feel their sweetness and thrill, and then he saw a slow gathering mist, and tears. "I'll go wherever you go," she was whispering, "and we'll hide where they won't ever find us, and I'll be happy, so happy, Mister Roger, and if you won't take me, I want to die. Oh!" She was crying, with her head on his breast, and her slim, half bare arms around his neck, and Jolly Roger listened like a miser to the choking words that came with her sobs. And where there had been tumult and indecision in his heart, there came suddenly the clearness of sunshine and joy, and with it the happiness of a new and mighty possession as his arms closed about her, and he turned her face up, so that for the first time he kissed the soft red lips that for some inscrutable reason the God of all things had given into his keeping this day. And then, holding her close, with her arms still tighter about his neck, he cried softly, "I'm going to take you, little girl. You're going with Peter and me, forever and ever. And we'll go tonight." When Peter came back, just in the last sunset glow of the evening, he found his master alone in the bit of jackpine opening, and Nada was swiftly crossing the larger meadow that lay between them and the break in Cragg's Ridge, beyond which was Jed Hawkins' cabin. It was not the same Jolly Roger whom he had left half an hour before. It was not the man of the hiding place in the rock pile. Jolly Roger McKay, standing there in the last soft glow of the day, was no longer the fugitive and the outcast. He stood with silent lips, yet his soul was crying out its gratitude to all that God of life which breathed its sweetness of summer evening about him. He was the first possessor of the earth. In that hour, that moment, he would not have sold his place for all the happiness of all the remaining people in the world. He cried out loud, and Peter, squatted at his feet with his red tongue lolling out, listened to him. "She is mine, mine, mine," he was saying, and he repeated that word over and over until Peter quirked his ears and wondered what it meant. And then, seeing Peter, Jolly Roger laughed softly, and bent over him with a look of awe and wonderment mingling with the happiness in his face. "She's mine, ours," he cried boyishly. "God A'mighty took a hand, Pied Bot, and she's going with us. We're going tonight, when the moon comes up. And Peter, we're going straight to the Missioner's, and he'll marry us, and then we'll hit for a place where no one in the world will ever find us. The law may want us, Pied Bot, but God, this God all around, is good to us, and we'll try and pay him back. We will, Peter." He straightened himself and faced the west. Then he picked up the bundle Nada had brought, and dived through the jackpines with Peter at his heels. Swiftly they moved through the shadowing dusk of the plain, and came at last to the stew kettle, and to their hiding place under the shoulders of Gog and Magog. There was still a faint twilight in the tunnel, and in this twilight Jolly Roger McKay packed his possessions, and then, with fingers that trembled as if they were committing a sacrilege, he drew Nada's few treasures from her bundle, and placed them tenderly with his own. And all the time Peter heard him saying things under his breath, so softly that it was like the whispered drone of song. In darkness they went down through the rocks to the plain, and half an hour later they came to the break in the ridge, and went through it, and stopped in the black shadow of a great rock, with Jed Hawkins' cabin half a rifle shot away. Here Nada was to come to them with the first rising of the moon.